Hey, everybody. Welcome. I am your podcast coach, Kristen Chadwick, and today is podcasting Q&A, which means I get to answer your questions. And this is a very common question that I get a lot from podcasters, especially current podcasters or some that have, been a year in or more, but this really applies to everybody. Before I tell you the question, I want to make sure that you know that you can send me a message anytime and ask me a question, and I will answer it here on our Quick Tip Thursdays for podcasting Q&As. So, our question of the day is, how do I grow my podcast? First, I firmly believe we are all called to grow. We are all called to make forward progress, glory to glory. We are called to be kingdom multipliers. It reminds me of when Jesus was explaining how the kingdom works, and he tells a parable of the talents. You may have heard about it. And something that I have noticed is that sometimes actually, every time that Jesus shares a parable, it can have multiple layers and multiple meanings in different areas of our lives. First and foremost, in our own growth and spiritual connection with Him. So let's talk about this. Matthew 25:14 says, "For it is just like a man who was about to go on a journey, and he called his servants together and entrusted them with his possessions." Okay, let's pause here first. Jesus has called each one of us as podcasters. Most of us knew God was calling us to start a podcast or had that deep knowing. Maybe you had many people telling you, or you just knew in your quiet time, or you woke up in the middle of the night and you were like, "Yes, Lord, I will create a podcast begrudgingly or confidently, whichever one." We are all like these servants in the parable of the talents. And we have been all called to create a podcast in this season. We are serving God first, right? In our podcast. And it's a delight to create with Him and to love people through our podcast. I love the amplified version of this verse as it says, entrusted them with His possessions. God has entrusted you with His testimony, His glory, His message, His image, His people who listen to your podcast. Just sit with that. He has entrusted every single download, every single listen, every single person that has crossed your path and seen what you bring to the table or hear what you have to say. He has entrusted them to you. The next part of this parable, I think, can parallel again to whatever God has entrusted you with, whether it's a spiritual gift or a natural talent of speaking or writing or children or finances, whatever it is. I want you to think about all of those things, but today I want to answer this question of how do I grow my podcast by thinking about what are those talents in our hands. Those are our listeners. To one person, he gave 5 talents. So it could be you have 10 downloads per episode. The other servants, it continues on to say that he gave 2. And to another one, according to his own ability, 1, right? So each of these, God knew what he was going to give each of these servants. Now, something that I've been pondering lately is they didn't question what they were given. Have you ever noticed that? I think that is a very interesting part of Jesus's story, is that he chose how much to give to each servant. The servants didn't question how many God gave them. They just took and received what was entrusted, and they went out and they did what they knew what was best for them. Now, they each did it a little bit differently. The one who had 5 talents went out and traded them and multiplied and made profit. The one who had 2 went out and made profit. And then the last one, he's the one that didn't do the multiplication thing. He actually went and hid his. He went and hid what was given, and he didn't multiply what was given to him or entrusted to him. the end of that teaching of Jesus, we hear Jesus explain that the man comes back. The servants who just naturally went out, put effort in, and multiplied. He even says that they were blessed and they could share in the joy of the master. Jesus again says, "For to everyone who has values," actually, let me say this again. Jesus at the end, he's saddened that the guy that only had one talent, he went and hid, and so that broke his heart. So to wrap it up, you're seeing these 3 different servants who were entrusted with talents. Jesus says to them, "For to everyone who has and values blessing and gifts from God and has used them wisely, more will be given, and he will be richly supplied so that he will have an abundance. But from the one who doesn't have because he has ignored or disregarded his blessings and gifts from God, even what he does have will be taken away." Friends, I think the invitation here is to focus on the gifts, the abilities to share your story, your testimony, the frameworks God has given you, the people that He has given you to speak into. How do you pour into each of these people who are currently listening? How do we multiply? We pour into the people who are already listening. We go out and we share and we create visibility. Are you creating deep thought leader type of episodes? Sometimes I get the question a lot of, how long should my episode be? It should be as long as it is transformational. The last thing that I think that we need as podcasters is more information, or listeners need more information, and we need depth. We are all hungry for depth. So take time to really create in-depth episodes for your listeners. That's a way to serve your listeners, and that's how they go out and they share. They multiply it for you because you are serving them well in this season. So if you need help with growing your podcast, I do offer a VIP podcast growth consultation coaching course for you that is both online and one-on-one coaching for a 90-day period. It's almost, I think it's about 4.5 hours of personalized coaching with accompanying tools, 5-minute videos where I share how you can increase growth for your podcast through organic ways and also effort-based ways, including advertisements and social media and all different areas. So if you're interested in hearing more, don't hesitate and reach out, and let's have a free call together where we can discuss whether this is a great fit for you or if it's just really putting your head down and serving the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your might, with all of your mind, heart, spirit, soul, right? And then we get to go out and we get to love our listeners well. So remember, God has entrusted us with our current listeners. And in order to grow your podcast, you sow into the people He has already given you. Multiplication happens when you love well and you serve the ones currently in front of you well. All right, that's it for this week. I'll see you next week.